All right, then. Welcome back to Lantern Corps. From Newborn Viking, we have the question of what is the Lantern Corps of? I believe it's Akira Fudo. I believe that's his name. Let me get his name one more time. Akira. I believe it's Akira Fudo, right? Fudo from from Devilman, Crybaby. A character who I have in fact done on the series before. Not this series, obviously, but on Who Would Win, if I'm not mistaken. In fact, you know what? Let me double. Let me double down on that checking real quick. Did I actually already do this Lantern Corps? I've done. This is one of those things where I get to the point where I've done so many of them that I sometimes have to go back and check if I have done them before, because I see a character and I go, yeah, I don't think I've done that one yet. No, that doesn't sound like something that's familiar to me. But I'm like, I've done so many. I'm like, let me just be absolutely. I know I've had him in Who Would Win before. I know I've done that. But I don't know for certain if I've had him. All right. Let's see here. Akira Fudo. Akira Fudo. Because if I have done him, well, then I'll be getting rid of this and doing another one in a second. Okay, Chainsaw Man. Okay, yeah. I've only done the one. I've done him versus Chainsaw Man. That's what I've done in terms of an actual versus with him. Otherwise, I do not have. I'll check again real quick. Devilman. I'll check again real quick here. I have, and I also did, and I read the original version of him versus Karna from Fate, or Apocrypha, whatever that was. Okay, I have not done a Lantern Corps video on him. Okay, cool, wonderful. Moving on. Okay, so this is an interesting story. I'm not very familiar with this. I'm familiar enough with it to be like, okay, I could use it for a versus, but I wasn't familiar of it from a story perspective and a character perspective. And that's kind of what Lantern Corps is really breaking down, is the character and the emotional state of that character. This is interesting because up until near the end of the series, he really doesn't change who he is in terms of at his core. He's a good person who just wants to help people the best way he can. He's called Crybaby because he just cries, even though he's not capable of feeling genuine sorrow or sadness for himself. He will cry for others. And then he merges with a devil to try to fight other devils. Now, spoilers for a series that is, how old is this series now? It's not a young series anymore. It's actually a pretty old series compared to others. Devilman Crybaby, animated. How old is this series now? It's 8 years old, 7 years old. So it's not like super old, but it's old enough that I can say spoilers. And look, if you haven't watched it, okay, spoilers. And then I'll hold my hand up right here, and then I'll bring it back because it's recent enough that if you're interested in watching it, you should at least be warned. So spoilers, 3, 2, 1, spoiler hand up. As people die, his outlook on life changes, and therefore so does his emotional state. And by the time he's betrayed at the end by Rio, revealing himself to be Satan, he's pretty much all just said, screw humanity, I'm going to wreck you. But does ultimately die in the end, which would mean that, by all accounts, spoilers down, he should be a Black Lantern, but we're not going to do that. That's boring. We're going to kind of look at him throughout the series a little bit. And, believe it or not, I don't know if I would call him a Green Lantern. Yeah, he's got a decent amount of willpower to keep going, but eventually that willpower does kind of waver. It doesn't waver in the traditional sense. Like, he's still got great willpower. He's just... there's so many other emotions kind of going on with him throughout the series and near the end that I don't know if green is the right answer. Yellow would be a good answer, though. He has a devil, and as a devil fighting against other devils, he would inspire fear. And not just possibly devils he's fighting, but humans who see him. So that does make some sense. I would say also that the love for his friends and humanity at the time would be something that drives him in the early to mid parts of the series. I think that is a reasonable thing to say. And him carrying out hope, like him keeping hope alive, would also be important too, I think. The problem, though, is once we get to the end of the series, I think there really is only one answer. Now, that being said, because of the emotional changes, the physical changes that happen with him as the Devilman, and what they kind of resulted in, there is the idea that he could be an absolute Red Lantern. Now, the absolute Red Lanterns, from what I can find, are derived from rage, but are derived from a restraint, control over that rage. They're holding back their rage. Similar to, kind of like how Atrocitus in the main DC Universe continuity, yes, he is driven by his rage, but he has the willpower to kind of harness his rage. This is restraining and controlling that rage. That's how the Red Lanterns actually work in the DC Absolute Universe. So there's actually a good, strong argument for most of the series that he could be an absolute Red Lantern. Unfortunately, before he dies, he's definitely going to be a Red Lantern. He's lost one of his best friends, lost all hope and faith in humanity at that point, which means any Blue Lantern qualifications now go out the window. And then the reveal of Satan himself being his best friend and tricking him drives him well over the edge. And now he's just like out for straight out revenge and bloodlust. So if we're going to go by him near the end of the series, before he's obviously killed and doesn't survive, it's got to be the Lantern Corps of Rage. Absolutely. And we're talking about leading up to it. I would say it's weirdly enough a mix of either the absolute Red Lanterns or the absolute, sorry, not absolute, where is it? Or a Lantern of Love because of his love for his friends. Because that's what ultimately is motivating him. Now, there is also an argument, I thought, for the absolute Green Lanterns, which don't act on willpower so much as acting on like the right action at the right time kind of things, or kind of mentality. I don't know if I can really see that, unfortunately. I mean, maybe before he became the Devilman, maybe that's what I could have seen him as initially. But overall, I'd say if we're talking about just during the series up until like the terrible stuff happens, he's either a blue or an absolute red. But if we're talking about at the very end of the series, before he's gone, rage, definitely rage. That's the only thing driving him at that point. So that would be my thoughts on Akira Fudo's from Devilman Crybaby's Lantern Corps. Granted, this is just my opinion. Let me know what you think. He really does. I use this term a lot, but he does run an emotional gambit. He doesn't run the entire emotional spectrum, but green still has a good argument for it. Yellow certainly. Red is I think, personal argument. Definitely has an argument for compassion. I do not think he's a Lantern of compassion, though, because they look for someone who actually doesn't have compassion in them. Although I could see the absolute version of that being the inverse of that. They're looking for the most compassionate person they can find. We still, by the way, don't have the lantern, like the absolute versions of White Lanterns, Blue Lanterns, Orange Lanterns, Love, or Compassion Lantern. We only actually have Green, Red, Yellow/Gold, and Black Lanterns. Those are the only ones we actually have. So we'll have to see exactly if the other absolute colors show up, what they'll be like, and I'll have to alter this again. But until then, thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed. Like, comment, share, subscribe, and I'll see you guys for the next one. Later.